Good morning, children. Now we are going to start the next chapter, that is force and the laws of motion. Already the first chapter, motion, it was completed. Now what is the difference between the chapter motion than this force and the laws of motion? In the first chapter, motion, we were talking about the motion of object in which the cause of motion was not considered. If an object is moving, due to which cause the object comes in motion, it was not considered. It was not discussed. We only concerned about the motion of object. But in this chapter, force and the laws of motion, we are concerning about the cause of motion and the motion of object. Both must be concerned. Both must be discussed. This chapter, force and the laws of motion, the force word you have already discussed in class 8, force and pressure. That means you know something, basic things about the force. Force is the external agent which is applied on an object to make the object to change its state of rest or motion or direction, anything. Suppose this is the surface. On the surface, if anything is placed, any object is placed, to change its state, what is required? The external agent must apply something. This is the surface. If an object is already in motion, if it is moving, then also to change its state means to stop this. The external agent has to do something. That something applied on this object by the external agent to change its state is known as the force. So, the force can be defined. It is an external agent which is applied on an object to change its state of rest or motion. We can define it more clearly that it is an external agent which is applied on an object to change or tends to change. To change or tends to change means if we use the external agent, that external agent may change the state or tends to change the state. It is not necessary that whatever the external agent is applying on this object, it definitely changes its state. It may or may not. That's why we use the word tends to change. That is the force. This force was also defined in the last year. Means whenever we apply the force, due to the force, many effects takes place. If the object is at rest, it may come in motion. If it is in motion, it may come to rest. It may come to rest. If the force is applied, the direction of object can be changed, or the shape and size can also be changed. So there are 4 effects of forces. There are 4 effects that also discussed in the last year in class 8th. Now here we are going to discuss the force in detail. We are going to discuss the force more, something more than the class 8. Okay, so this is the force. And now if we use any object, if we are taking an object, on this object, suppose this is the object placed on the surface. Now we apply the force from this direction. Let us take this is F1. So we are applying only one force from left to right. Then more than one force can also be applied. The other force can also be applied on this object in the same direction. Let us take this as second force. Then the third force can also be applied, and the third force may be applied from the same direction or in the opposite direction. So in this way, any number of forces can be applied on a single object. Now, if one force is acting on any object, definitely that force change or tends to change the state. Here we are taking that it is at rest. The object is at rest. If we apply one force, that is F1, it may change or change the state. It may move the object. Then 2 forces can also do the same thing. 3 forces can also do the same thing. So in this way, any number of forces can be applied on a single object. And all the number of forces, all the forces acting on this object may produce the effect, may or may not produce the effect. On the basis of this, the forces applied on this object can be classified into 2 types. One is unbalanced force. First one is unbalanced forces. Second, balanced forces. Unbalanced forces and balanced forces. From the word itself, you can find what actually unbalanced and balanced forces. Unbalanced forces, the number of forces acting on this object are not balancing each other. This F1, F2, F3. They are not balancing each other. That's why we say unbalanced forces. If they are not balancing each other, then there may be some effect of force. Here second one is balanced forces, that means they are all balancing each other. The group of forces, here we take three forces, the group of forces balancing each other. Which force is balancing other force, that we will discuss later on. Balanced forces means all the forces are balancing each other. One more thing also we discussed in the last class. If the forces applied in the same direction, they are all added. If they are applied in the opposite direction, then they are subtracted. That means the difference of forces taken place. Once again, we are going to simplify that we are going to use only two forces. We may take three forces, but for our convenience, for the simplification, we use two forces, F1 and F2. And both are acting on this object in the opposite direction. They may be applied from the same direction, but here we are taking that they are applied in the opposite direction. If these two forces are applied on the same object and they are applied in the opposite direction, then the resultant of these two